welcome back. If you're just joining us, it's Daybreak on Trust Television. It is that segment where we take a deep dive into the issue of the day. And for this morning, we will be looking at Nigeria's debt level. Just recently, the Central Bank Governor, Olayemi Cardoso, issued a warning to Nigeria and other developing nations regarding the risks associated with debt accumulation, cautioning that unchecked debt levels could impede economic growth and prosperity. Despite acknowledging the stable situation in Nigeria, Cardoso highlighted the near-term risks posed by unfavorable global market conditions and increased debt burden resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. Many experts have attributed Nigeria's economic challenge in part to the accumulated debts that have not translated into meaningful developments. Despite this, Nigeria continues to allocate substantial funds to service both local and foreign debts, with borrowings persisting at both national and state level. This morning on Daybreak, we'll be focusing on Nigeria's rising debt and its impact on public spending. And we have in the studio Senator Abubakar Yusuf Abubakar. Senator Abubakar is an economist, a farmer, who represented Taraba Central constituency in the Red Chamber in the 8th and 9th Assembly. You're welcome, distinguished.
Thank you very much.
You seem to wear so many caps. From being a senator to a farmer to an economist, it sort of puts you in a perfect state for the conversation that we should have this morning, especially considering what this country is going through, from the acute feed shortages resulting from insecurities that have prevented farmers from going to the farm, and now the galloping exchange rate situation that has prevented us from affording some of the things we used to get access to easily. But we will come to that in a jiffy. This is the central bank governor sounding the warning. Before him, there have been several economists like yourself who have raised concerns over what appeared to be the rising debt rate, what appears to be a government having no other idea of raising funds to execute public expenditure other than borrowing. Do you agree with the warnings that were sounded by Cardoso, and why?
Well, thank you very much. Certainly, the warning is apt. Everyone in this country, have to have concern about, the level in which, our borrowing, has developed over a period of time. You see, in running an economy, if you say you are just going to rely on easy way of generating funds, that means, by borrowing, either through foreign or, through local or through other means. And you do not look at the side of generation of revenue. Because generation of revenue is very, very fundamental. And if you cannot say, well, I'm not generating enough revenue, so you must cut your coat according to your cloth. So if you are not cutting your coat according to your cloth on the belief that, let me do, deficit, budgeting, such that I can borrow to cover that one up. It's a bit of time. This thing has built over time. I could remember Obasanjo had to get a debt, a relief. I think it was either 28 billion at that point, and he got a relief of over 20 billion.
Yes.
And it is from that, 8 billion that has now grown up to the level that we are today.
$43 billion.
43 or even more. I'm scared actually to cut numbers, because if you are cutting numbers, you do not know from which part are you cutting the numbers. What the CBN may give you will be different from what Ministry of Finance will give you is different. From Nigeria Bureau of Statistics will give you is different. From civil society organization will give you is different. From expert, it is all different. So that is why, it is very, very difficult sometimes for one to pin a number. You can only say from this level to that level, and that is very, very unfortunate. That is why, the governor, is particular about this, because we do not know. To be honest, we do not. Even the debt management office can only, say, what it thinks it is. For instance, in debts, There are what we call, conditional debts.
That's right.
There are what we call, the real debt. There are so many issues surrounding about this sovereign debt. So, for me, I think his warning is apt, and it is of concern to each and every one of us in this country. Whether you are a farmer, whether you are a bureaucrat, or whether you are a civil servant, or whether you are a businessman, but as this thing develop over time, we allow it to almost, getting out of hand, which it shouldn't have been.
You are an economist, and looking at the Nigeria situation as it is right now, if supposing you had the president ears and you needed to advise, are we at a place where we cannot afford to borrow? I mean, looking at the current budget, we have estimated about 8 trillion naira for debt service, and we are still going to borrow. We have seen a number of those borrowings already. We have also seen this particular administration securitize another 7 trillion naira in ways and means. And we are getting all kinds of bilateral loans from his own agency. The NNPC has gone to do $13 billion in what they call a crude swap. So potentially even trading future sources of revenue for some kind of current borrowings in dollar. If you were to advise the president, is there something we should be doing differently? Are there options we are not exploring?
Well, thank you very much. First and foremost, there is nothing wrong in borrowing. But you must have a better use of that borrowing. You should not borrow to consume. You should borrow, to build, either infrastructure or to build, sources of, revenue that can pay back the loan. So, but if we are just, borrowing just to consume, or borrowing, for corruption purposes, or so that is where we have our biggest, nightmare. So, for me to advise Mr. President, I'm on the progressive side, really. I would say, explore areas that you can have progressive taxation. Our luxuries in this country are not taxed at all. So, the poor is now subsidizing the rich in this country, and it shouldn't be. For me, Mr. President should look at that area where, they will look at, luxuries that must be taxed. And then business people that are generating revenue, they are undercutting their revenue in such a way that, they are not, are pulling their own efforts to pay the relevant taxes. So for me, Nigerian economy is undertaxed, both at the national and subnational governments. They are undertaxed. I'm not talking about personal income tax. I'm talking about some businesses. Some businesses are making fantabulous profits in this country, while others hardly. So we should be able to divide and see which economy is doing. We must prioritize our economy in such a way in which we want a good direction to follow. For instance, what is our most priority sector of this country today? I mean, economy today. Is it agriculture? Is it solid minerals? Is it trading? Is it manufacturing? We have not prioritized. So we cannot even pin a kind of taxation that we are going to put that will generate income to enable us meet our own our repayments of loan, because those loans are not project tied.
But distinguished business owners, and you're one of them, would disagree with you slightly, because however you look at the tax system in Nigeria, they will tell you that the effective tax rate is much, much higher than what they're paying. If you have to provide your own power, you have to provide your own roads, you have to buy the trucks to convey your goods from production points to the market and practically do the things that the government should do for you. If you look at that as an indirect form of tax on the business, because it takes away from whatever the business will, isn't that so much burden for businesses in Nigeria as it is?
It might be a burden, for instance, for micro, small, and medium enterprises, which I think, is contributing its quota immensely, to our GDP. But the point I'm saying, I'm looking at areas of luxury consumption. For instance, what we cannot afford, why do we have to spend our expensive foreign exchange to import? Are we charging enough, import duty on those luxury items? Because the luxury items do not impact much, on the common man. I'm not talking about those things that impact common man. I'm talking about the luxury. The well-to-do in this country are living on what do I call it? On the common man, which it shouldn't be. I give you an example. Our networks, this MTN, and the rest of them. Now, statistics has shown that 50 to 60 to 70% of our calls are what? Are not business. They are social. But do you know how much money that we spend on social calls against, the business calls? In this country today, landlines of telephones has virtually vanished. And which is the cheapest form of, it should be the cheapest form of communication. Today we are using the most expensive form of communication even to do businesses. So these are the areas that I think we should look at. And we should be able to, I'm not saying that, businesses that have been, operating over a period of time, yes, there's a limit to which you can charge tax, either to discourage or to encourage, taxation. But I'm talking about luxuries, luxuries that we do not even produce in this country. So for me, I think that is the area in which I would want Mr. President to look at. And also, not just that area of revenue generation, but also in terms of expenditure control. We have no reason, to go into that kind of, deficit, budgeting that we are doing. Federal government, in terms of fiscal federalism, federal government is probably getting maybe 30-something%, of the total revenue that is generated. The states and local government are getting, about 60 to 70%. What are they using that money for? That is where the issue is. For me, not blaming, federal government under President Muhammad Buhari or blaming federal government under, the president, President, His Excellency Asiwaju. No. What are the governors doing with the money they are collecting? And they are collecting that of the local governments as well. So now, where is the money going? What are they using that money for? Some people say that the moment, they credit the accounts, from FAC, that day, the exchange rate, the Naira will depreciate further. So that means the money that is going to the local governments and state is too much in terms of either their own responsibilities or they are not utilizing the money for the purpose for which they were meant for. There are some governors that are doing fantastically well, no doubt about it. But majority of the governors, of the state governors, in my own opinion, need to sit up, need to account for what they are collecting, from FAC, and they need to compare it from the internally revenue generation that they do. So I think
we'll come back to that. But looking at our current structure, today, over 90% of our income goes to debt service. So we are already on the brinks, as it were. Every 100 naira we make, we spend well over 90, paying debts. There are critical infrastructures that cannot wait. They have to be provided if you must create the pedestal for other things to take off. We are in a food crisis, and all of these things have to be handled together. Now, you have some persons saying we are not borrowing enough. In fact, the body language from some government official is the penchant to want to compare whatever we have borrowed to other climes where their borrowing is in multiple folds of the size of their GDP. Why there is this call for caution? What exactly is your perception about the sense that we have? I mean, you know of the former deputy governor of the central bank yesterday, who said he would rather we go for a $30 billion in one bulk, get that money, maybe restructure some of the short-term debts into long-term instruments so that it creates a bit of breathing on the short to medium term, and then put a huge amount of that debt, that money, into some kind of infrastructures to create stabilization. And the same views have been held by Jimo Ibrahim, who is also an economist in his own right, and your colleague in the Senate. What do you make? Are you in that school of thought that believes that we should borrow our life out to fix the problem? Or you are with those ones who think it is time for us to start thinking of other ways of encouraging fresh fundings into the public sector without necessary borrowing? Why don't we concession the roads? Why are we not selling debt assets that are just sitting in the books of government and now bringing in money? What is wrong with the government retaining 100% shares in refineries that are not producing crude and all of that? What do you think the mix should be for us? Should we go with more borrowings, or we'll find a way of recalibrating our income base as it is right now?
Well, I think it's a combination of both. If we are borrowing for projects that are going to generate revenue to repay, I have no problem with that. That can go for the restructuring. However, a warning is if we are borrowing to consume. And that's what has been happening. Concessions are made all over the country, all over the world. There's no reason why we cannot also explore areas of concession, so long as it is transparent and it is accountable. I don't want, a concession where they will say, okay, you will pay over a period of 15 years. Then after 2 years, they will say, we have looked at these books, and then we have to pay over a period of 30 years. No, we have to make things, in a right perspective. I know everywhere in the world, the public-private, participation, in all this project. For me, yes, we can borrow more so long as it's going to be for, project-type borrowing. And then for the stabilization, we have to be very, 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 very careful. If we say we want to stabilize, we have to start thinking of looking how to stabilize from the local sources. It is not just, borrowing, and then trying to think that, how, at what rate are we going to match, our parallel with our official, and therefore so that we can now have a stable, foreign exchange rate at that. My argument has always been that why are you margin at a higher and not margin at a lower? What is wrong in margin at a lower? Because we do not have the foreign exchange to sustain, floating of the naira. We have to be very, 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 very honest. We have to be very, very sincere. These things are not the way they are. Example, the naira is undervalued, but others in government think that for the undervalued currency, you have to apply overvalued principles to solve the problem of undervaluation. People are just looking at, for rent seekers. It is not. You do not have enough. Say you do not have enough. And therefore, how do we generate, foreign exchange? For instance, If we subsidize importation of petroleum products, why can't we subsidize exports? What is wrong? We can subsidize exports. To make export, our export, probably cheaper and more competitive to generate more foreign exchange. We can also apply, duty, import duty on luxury items. There are things that we can do without, but we insist they are the most important thing. Vehicles. Today, majority of the vehicles we use are imported vehicles. And we cannot afford it. Where is the foreign exchange to sustain the kind of importation of vehicles and the importation of the luxury items, even our television? I'm talking about private luxuries.
Senator, I'm sure our viewers at home will be wondering, because every time we talk about this fiscal discipline, the average citizen looks up to the National Assembly as a place where they think they can compel the executives, to or hold them to account or hold them to the fire to implement some of this fiscal discipline. But the National Assembly seem, to become another place that appears to also enjoy some of these things. You know how much they spend buying vehicles for themselves at a time when we were talking about cutting down cost of governance. One would think that before you impress it on another arm, to be accountable, you must show that by example. Do you think we have a National Assembly that has the balls to hold this executive affair, especially in cutting down some of these extra ways? For instance, that the National Assembly only recently indicated interest to investigate the 30 trillion ways and means that has now been described as a monumental fraud. You took that money out of the system unbudgeted, about the size of our current budget, and expended them in ways that we cannot tell what impact that they have made on the economy. Is the National Assembly stamping its feet enough to insist on fiscal discipline?
Okay, I don't think the National Assembly has done that or has been doing that, over a period of time. But you have to ask the question, why? For a simple reason. Who are those in the National Assembly? Who are those? You see, the kind of membership that should have been stamping its feet, would have been much more different than the ones we have. That is one. Two, information. The National Assembly, I've been there in the 8th Assembly, I've been there in the 9th Assembly. The National Assembly does not get the relevant information for it to work with.
But this is something they can request for.
It is not just requesting. If you request for information, how are you going to corroborate that information is the information that will enable you to work with very well? So there are so many issues relating to, the budget. For instance, in the United States of America, they have what they call, the Congress budget.
That's right.
We do not have here. When I came in the 8th Assembly, 9th Assembly, I tried to say that, look, let us develop our own, area of research so that the National Assembly can also develop its own budget so that by the time the executive budget comes in, they will compare. Even the party that is in government, there's no reason why the party in government, cannot have its own research and development to make its own budget and then compare. So there is issue of information availability. There's information of credible information too. There's also information of who are those that are generating the information. There's also issue of this, lack of cooperative and consultative federalism. That is affecting the way, we handle, how the federal relates to the state in terms of, budget.
Is it, distinguished, is it a function of the National Assembly over time selling itself short, to the extent that they have not insisted on these things? We have seen in the same, United States that you reference, how a failure of the executive to do what has been instructed by the nation has led to the National Assembly stamping its foot and withholding assent on the budget until those conditions are met, which almost led to a breakdown in fiscal operations. Can't you stamp your feet, especially in providing details of budgetary spending, one line items that we are not sure where it is going, who is getting what are the parameters for reaching some of those pricing mechanisms and all of that? Is it impossible for the National Assembly to stand its feet and take its place as an institution that is supposed to check the activities and exercises?
It is not impossible, to do that. But what I'm saying is matter of, consultation. It's matter of cooperation. We say, there are three horizontal tiers of government that we have, or parts of government: the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. So there's a lot of impunity. Remember, we are coming out of, although it's many years ago, up till now we have that impunity. People think that, they are operating a military type of government. Do this, don't do this, you must do this, and you must have that. So that level of cooperation and consultation is still missing, and we need that. And then a lot of more that we need to have a lot of self-discipline in what we do in this country. Self-discipline is very, very, very important, because if you don't discipline yourself, there is no way people that are not, are self-disciplined, that will have a community discipline and that will have, a national discipline. I think it is important we look into that area. How do we imbibe this culture of self-discipline? Positive attitudes to things, rather than looking at the selfish way of doing things. In my own opinion, I think, for instance, in the 8th Assembly, 9th Assembly, we had budget defense, and all what I've been saying, we have innocent vehicles. Why can't we buy them? Innocent is a Nigerian thing.
That's right.
Whether the assembly or whatever they are doing, I think we should promote that kind. I could remember there was a book, written by one of my colleagues, is it I'm from Aba or something like that. So we must believe in Nigeria. We must believe, and over time, if you do not do something over time, you are not going to get the best out of it. You cannot climb, a tree from the top. So we must learn to appreciate and then develop from our rudimentary, from our crude, until, we make it better and better and better.
Maybe before I switch away from these questions, I would like to understand, and I'm sure our viewers would also, how much of, once those budget documents, because all of the fiscal discipline begins with the budget. As it is right now, how much of scrutiny do you think goes into that budget document in terms of independent scrutiny? Do you think the current National Assembly has the crop? Because these are things that with a bit of technology and the right human resource, there are young boys who can distill these budgets for you using certain parameters. Do you think this National Assembly, what do you think they need to do with regards to putting some of those forensic instrumentalities in place that help them to distill what the executive gives to them and develop price mechanism to question how some of these contract sums or project sums arrived at, and so that thing you talk about, which is a comparative tool that helps you to say, this is what you have given us, but we think we can do this thing much, much lower given these parameters. Do you think they have those kind of framework, and what do you think it would take to really put those in place?
In my own opinion, in principle they have, but in practice, it is becoming, for those two words I told you, lack of consultation and lack of cooperation between the tiers of government and also between the tiers of the executive, the legislature, and what have you. It is not a rocket science to say that, look, this is how we want this budget. In the United States of America, it takes about 6 months to budget, to debate on the budget. Here we are taking 1 month.
From presentation to passage.
Yes, from presentation to passage. I don't think that is all right. During our own time, I think we took about either 4 months. During the 9th Assembly, we've been taking 3 months. At this time, it's just 1 month. So I don't think 1 month is good enough for the National Assembly to dissect the budget and look at it holistically in such a way that it will bring in a lot of fiscal discipline into it. In terms of what I talk about fiscal federalism. A lot of people think that once you are given money, you should not account for it. Accountability is part and parcel of an effective budgeting system. For instance, for me, in Nigeria, what we do today, we budget before we plan. We do not plan, and then budget. That is why they give them envelopes. Whatever you have, the Ministry of National Planning and Ministry of Finance will just give an agency envelope, go and implement this. So that is budget before planning. And I don't think that is working well for this country.
Okay.
Secondly, I don't think budget department really should be outside, the presidency. Okay. It should be within the presidency and not in the ministry. So, in my own opinion, I think we need to look at these levels so that we can have, so that whatever the bureaucracy has taken to the executive to look at it, they do not have ways in which to say, are these figures that are coming, how genuine are they, how credible are they? There is no mechanism.
And you think just moving it from the ministry to the presidency?
I think because once you move it to the presidency, what will happen there is that you are at the highest. You are looking at everything down. But if, the way it is now, you are also looking at what do I do for presidency? What do I do for National Assembly? What do I do for this? What do I do for that? So in my own opinion, I think, just like what we have in United States of America, where is the budget office? The budget office is not in the secretariats. It is, in the office of Mr. President. That's where the budget is, because that is where you are going to call each and everyone to account for what they are. For instance, Minister of National Planning, will find it difficult to call, maybe Minister of Finance, maybe Minister of Water Resources to account. But if it is, an institution that is at the top at the presidency, there are the people who monitor, there are people who supervise, can be saying, hey, look, this is how this thing should be and not the way you want it to be. So there won't be this, what I call, a peer group, minister and minister. He said, why should this minister dictate?
All right, distinguished. Slightly away from that, if you take a holistic view of the Nigerian economy and some of the things that it is battling with and some of the things we should be doing going forward, what do you think our priorities would be? Or rather, how do you think we can quickly expand revenue? Because every time, these government people will tell you we have a problem of revenue and not a problem of debt. They think our debt is sizable, but the revenues are just meager. You are also in the agri space. What can we quickly do to ramp up capacity in that space. We've been complaining about food shortages. That has worsened the current inflation because food inflation is at 35%. Some of your people will say effective food inflation is over 50%, in fact, that the government is just being mild with that figure. But even at 35%, that is huge, really. What can we do to get this farm? You saw the attack in Katsina just yesterday, local community that's predominantly made up of farmers, burnt in their sleep and all of that. What can we do to quickly arrest this situation and get people back to the farm and ramp up food production so that we can begin to arrest this galloping inflation?
So it is a difficult question because, we are a dependent economy. I could remember, President Muhammadu Buhari, closed the borders for a long period of time. And during that time, our farmers, have been able, to make a good harvest of revenue in terms of, production, especially of rice and what have you. If we do not think Nigerian, we think that, we are hungry and therefore open our borders for people to bring in food. That will not solve our problem, in my own opinion. So what will make us, make Nigerian a Nigerian thing? A dependent economy, like I said, between, I think, 90% or even more, or 90 kobo out of every 100 kobo or every 1 naira is import dependent. How can you survive with that? Today, I think I read where, they have arrested, intercepted, vehicles, moving with the commodities out of this country. So even our borders are so porous, even the way, we administer it. For me, I think it's like there is a collusion for rent seekers so that, you tie on this side, they move on the other side. We are talking about Naira, now we are talking about smuggling of commodities out of this country. So I think, that is where I said we will not run away from those words I have said. We must consult. Federal government must consult with state government because all the borders are within, a jurisdiction of states. Also, local governments are within the jurisdiction of states. So until we begin to look at the states cooperating with the policies of the federal government, and then, a lot of consultation, to take place, we will not be able, to have this thing because the states will now say, well, it is not my responsibility to monitor the border because border is a boundary, it is a federal government thing, but they have forgotten that. They are an important, stakeholder in terms of border control. Maybe we need to have time, maybe we need to look at, whether we can establish what we call, border controls, whether, we can be able to do that kind of thing in this country. But we must accept the fact that we are not believing in Nigeria. That is why we have all this situation of dollarization. For me, dollar is a corruption currency in this country today. It is a corruption currency. Whether we like it or not, it is. Dollar is not used for transactions. Dollar is used as a stock of value instead of the naira. So I think we need to ginger this economy, to the extent that each and every one of us will feel the impact of gingering.
That brings me to a very vital question, distinguished. Some economists will tell you that we are not exporting anything. By that, I mean predominantly we're a mono economy. And that it really doesn't make sense for us to have a lower exchange rate because that has been what has fueled and encouraged this penchant for luxuries because the naira was undervalued in their estimation, so people were more tilted towards buying whatever is available in the shelves in Dubai, in London, in Paris, and all of that. And almost all the middle-level people started thinking like the upper-class people. Everybody now wants the award in schools in London, and even as small places as Vietnam, Malaysia, Hong Kong, and Indonesia, in terms of educational power. Don't you think that this increased dollar rate is a blessing in disguise, to the extent that people are now rethinking some of those lifestyles and are now exploring alternative? Is it an all bad situation? Are there no silver lining in what is happening?
I don't know which category of people you are talking about. You know, for those who are stocking the dollar, they don't feel there's anything bad going on in this country. They don't think so. You know, the more the naira depreciate, the more they have too much naira in their hands in terms of, you know, exchanging, you know, the few dollars that they have. You know, why should we even allow a transaction in dollar in this country today? Why? Why will we become, you know, a financial satellite of United States of America? Why should we? Why should somebody want to hold dollar instead of naira? Why? What are you going to use the dollar for? Because the government has not, you know, sat up to say, look, from today, no transaction in dollar for whatever reason whatsoever. And we need to do that. And that is why we need the consultation with the state governors, the cooperation of the state governors. We need that. Because if the speculation that people talk about, okay, governors, please, once you get your fact, don't rush to foreign exchange market to go and buy dollar at whatever price. Maybe if that is settled, the corruptive demand for the foreign exchange will not hold again. So that, you know, the government will now think as the way the governments will now think the way the federal government is thinking of doing things. So I said we need to make people realize, people know that you are running a state, you know, as a subnational, you know, unit that should have been, you know, combinedly in terms of the monies you collect every month is more than what the federal government is collecting every month. And therefore, the big sum of money that will control security, for instance, insecurity, who technically who manages the land in this country? They are the states. And insecurity takes a place in the states. So what are the state governors doing about it? Rather than just sitting down and say that federal government, please, police, please, army, please, this. No. What are the state governors doing about it? Some of them, you know, are doing the right thing, but some of them do not think that, you know, that thing, you know, it is a federal thing, and therefore, no, I don't want to do it.
Interesting. I wish we could go on and on and on, but I'm afraid we will have to anchor at this point. Distinguished, it's been a pleasure talking to us. We have been talking to Senator Abubakar, Yusuf Abubakar, who is a farmer, an economist, and a former senator representing Taraba Central Constituency in the 8th and 9th Assembly. He has spoken as a countryman, as a farmer, as an economist, and a passionate Nigerian. It's a pleasure to have you join us in the studio this morning.
Thank you very much.
And
my pleasure
we'll continue
to be here.
explore opportunities to bring you around and tap into your wealth of experience.
Well, we will at an appropriate time, anytime. You know, we are Nigerian. We have to find a way of, you know, solving our problems in time.
Thank you very much. Viewers, this is where we anchor on our conversation with Senator Abubakar. The show continues shortly after this. Please don't go away. Welcome back. It's now newspaper review, and as it's tradition, we would begin with the Daily Trust. Daily Trust, by the way, is celebrating 25 years of robust journalism in Nigeria, and the major headline today is one that it's a bit worrying. Terrorists adopt scores of female IDPs in Borno. They left camp in search of firewood, according to community leader. Only 4 of the 117 returned so far. And military, Borno government, mom. Very pathetic situation. You recall that these women in the IDP were the same ones whose husbands were killed several years ago, whose children, some of them have also lost several of their children to the same terrorist attack. Now the same persons have fallen victims, right there at the IDP camp at a time when the governor is doing so much to return these places to normalcy. We also have a major story there on the front page of Smokes after an Israeli strike on Lebanon's southern village of Magdal Zaun yesterday. To other stories, FG to Israel, stop the war on Gaza. You find the details of that on page 5. Tribalism, flawed elections, bane of quality leadership, Jonathan. And mixed feelings as Binance exit Nigeria. Lassa fever kills 13 as missiles, Buruli ulcer hits Benue. Repent or leave Kanu, Hisba CG tells immoral persons. That's an interesting one. And Nigeria's economy not in distress. That is from Tinubu. I don't know if we hold the same perspective with him, or whether we live in the same country. Some persons will tell you jokingly. And Ghana's central bank suspend FX licenses of 2 Nigerian banks. And moving on to the Nigeria Tribune, which is our next paper. Why Africa is poor despite 96.5 trillion natural wealth. That's coming from AFDB President Adesina. Explains how Nigeria and other African countries have been helped to overcome food insecurity, to receive AWO Leadership Awards today, and joins Soyinka Mbeki Afebabalola on exclusive list. Says father started as a poor farmer without education for the first 14 years of his life. And to other stories, power outage delays plenary at Senate. Interesting developments there. I also saw pictures today on the social media where the Minister of Power was standing at a forum with his power bank attached to his phone. Interesting perspective in it. And Army has no desire to truncate democracy. This is coming from the Chief of Army Staff. It's good to get this reassurance once in a while. Tinubu must not jettison restructuring, and this is coming from Afenifere. EFCC arrests 21 food landing trucks bound for Chad and Cameroon. Nigeria must recruit selfless, transformational leaders. That is coming from Obasanjo at the event marking his 87th birthday. Jonathan, John Mahama, Bishop Kuka, Governor Abiodun, and others honor him at 87. And Ondo Guba, Ondo Guba PDP may adopt zoning. That's it on Tribune. We move on quickly to the New Telegraph this morning. And from the stables of the New Telegraph, investors' confidence man tackles FG over expatriate employment levy. It's been raging all over the place since the introduction or the announcement of the introduction of that levy by the federal government. And to other stories on the staples of the New Telegraph, this is from the Sharia Council to the FG. Tackling corruption will address prevailing situation in Nigeria. Tinubu has no excuse not to restructure Nigeria. That's from Afenifere. Fraudulent concessions, reps summon blue economy and transport ministers. Sawolu raises bursary scholarship for indigenous fiscally challenged students. And EFCC arrests 21 Chad, Central African Republic bound food landing trucks. Body of benchers admits Amechi 4,411. I mean, he's been governor, he's been minister, he's been Speaker of the House of Representatives, now called to the bar. It shows some resilience. And moving on to the Leadership newspaper this morning. At the Leadership Awards, only drastic actions can save Nigeria's economy. This is coming from Moalu. Moalu is the former deputy governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Advises Tinubu to rejig cabinet, go after bank CEOs over forex manipulations. Economy not in distress. President replies. Awards push to do more, says governors. I'm not desperate to be Nigeria's president. That's coming from Peter Obi. And we recognize those daring to seize possibilities. And that's these are all coming out of the Leadership Awards yesterday. And to other stories on the Leadership newspaper, dollar video, only AFCC can prosecute Ganduje. That's according to the court. FG blames food scarcity on smuggling, flooding, and others. And honesty, Kanu Keke rider Awolu reaps 250 million and PhD scholarship from the awards ceremony. Interesting developments there, if you ask me, on the papers this morning. And we now have joining us in the studio Mr. Ben Sharma. We both have been dodging each other in the last 2 weeks. He dodged us 2 weeks ago, and I dodged him last week.
And Abdullah is dodging today.
Abdullah is dodging today.
You are doing shifting cultivation.
I mean, we are all impacted by the Nigerian situation, and so we are finding ways to keep this going. But it's here today, and will be offering us perspective on what the papers are saying. By the way, Mr. Ben Sharma, it's the former director of news at The Voice of Nigeria. It's a pleasure to have you join us this morning.
Thank you. And also, before I retired, I was director training too.
Interesting. You now understand why some of us function the way we do. It was because of ancestors and pathfinders like Mr. Ben. It's a pleasure
I'm a living
to have
ancestor.
Welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
It's a sad one today on the front page of the Daily Trust. Again, at a time when the government was assuring us that those with the Boko Haram ideology, 95% or 98% wiped out. And we were thinking that we are heading towards now a sustainable rebuilding of the Northeast. We had to experience this again. When you saw this story, what impression did it make on you?
So, honestly, it beats one's imagination. Because at the point, yes, decimated, technically defeated, and all sorts of adjectives. And here we are. And look at the very reason. They left camp in search for firewood. Recall that River Niger and in Niger State, Kogi State too, you always have cases of boat mishap where they capsize and people just die. Over what? That they crossed over to go and look for firewood. If we are still talking of firewood today, no wonder the depletion of the forestry in Nigeria. But again, therefore, Boko Haram will look at what you call the soft target. This could be women, and of course, the moment you have women and children among them, they become soft targets. When you grab them, or when Boko Haram grabs them, it gets the screaming headlines as we have now. And therefore, they are also very, very vulnerable. And they do it to make a point that they are still available. And it now, it's therefore a thing that the military will have to be very, very careful. You want to use the Air Force, you want to just go bomb anywhere, of course you'll be meeting women who indeed have been taken. Or when we're talking of scores, a score is 20. Scores. And we are saying out of 117, only 4 have been found, approximately. So it's a thing that will give the security tuberculous some sleepless nights, the governor too, parents, everybody. We are in the studio discussing this. So something drastically ought to be done. And in the camps, what really is being done? How is the cooking being done? And I can see the active governor there, Zulum. He's actually trying. But I think that you should also look at this. This is a very big key indicator that all is not well in the camps. If there has to be some little gas cookers being given to save a situation, so be it, because the devastation of the desert is real. So when people go fell trees, come cook in order to survive, I think it's something that ought to be looked at seriously.
All right. I wish we could stay on this for long, but there are quite a number of things happening in Nigeria. We'll take a look at others. Another painful one is Lassa fever killing 13 in Benue. You know, we have been living with this for almost forever. You know, this reoccurrence of avoidable deaths. Do you think we are doing enough when it comes to sensitization, you know, or prevention of this kind of deaths in our local communities?
I think in terms of sensitization, it's always there, because leaflets have always been given out, some awareness, some education given onto communities around this federation, we know. And also, if you check the season, some of these things are seasonal. Once the season is around, people ought to know. But my worry is that these are diseases that can be tackled, but we just allow them to just keep on recurring. It's as if the National Council on Health is not doing enough. I mean, starting from the minister, then all the commissioners of health in every state, they ought to be doing some things that, I mean, Lassa fever, every year we're having this. And at the point it's becoming almost an all year round thing, not a thing of not seasonal any longer. I think that government should do things, communities too. Once you know these are the things to be avoided, NOA and even at the state level, state-on radios or TV stations, even the social media have always been saying some of these things. I also know that even in some churches, I don't know about mosques, but I do know that many of these religious organizations have been bringing a kind of awareness to worshippers. You know.
All right. On the front page of Leadership newspaper this morning, it's the conversation that I held yesterday. Interesting voices from that place. We heard Mo Alu, who was former presidential aspirant, former governor, Central Bank, former professor, University of California, tells us about what we need to do. He calls for a rejig of the minister and is urging the president to fire people who are not performing. He calls the 30 trillion Ways and Means a monumental fraud that needs to be investigated. He talks about a number of things that we need to do, you know, but right there, the president was telling us that the economy is not in distress. I'm not sure the president was speaking for you. Maybe he's speaking for the people who work at the Aso Villa. What do you make of the response of the economy and some of the comments that were made at the Leadership Award?
Yeah, I think on the side of the president, of course, he was boxed into a corner, and of course, he has to react that way. If Ukraine honestly is fighting a war and is exporting grains to us, it says a lot, quite a lot. And if you check when Peter Obi was given the mic, he went into the statistics. When you look at the geographical landmass of Ukraine, I mean, is it the size of Niger State? You look at that, and but if you also look at Kingsley, the then deputy governor of the Central Bank and a former presidential candidate too, this medicine given to us by IMF, is it actually working? I can see some other headlines saying that IMF is telling us
to start distributing money, yeah.
I mean, IMF must tell us what to do. In other words, it looks like IMF is an alternate government, or it is a superior government that must direct the federal government of Nigeria on what to do and what not to do. Unfortunately, I was listening to a government official from Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. What is he talking about? He's talking about plans to go into dry season farming. Sunday, we are in March. I mean, by April, the rains will be here. So when you want to plan for dry season farming, see, start that in September. So that October, as the rain ceases, you start farming. By now, we ought to be harvesting. This is time for you to start planning for what you call wet season farming. You cannot continue to be government of the future. No, it shouldn't be. And that was why leadership yearly affair, you could see that Nigeria was actually put on the scale. Why would people just break into stores and just steal food? He said there is no hunger. I mean, was it happening this way many years back? It wasn't. And you could even see some of the people saying, oh, that some of the grains have gone bad, which also means that they've been kept over time without taking care of them. So some got rotten, so to speak. And in spite of that, even when they got spoiled, you see that Nigerians will consume them. We've been boxed into this kind of a corner. And if we invest in agriculture, we're going to resolve many of these things. Talking of employment, it is one of the largest employer of labor. And when you look at the Nigerian Constitution, it even says if you are holding any position, go into farming. So it allows you to go to do two professions at the same time.
But in the face of this seeming shortage, the Tribune was also reporting that over 21 trailers stocked up with food items heading to the Central African Republic, to Chad and to Cameroon were intercepted. What is wrong with us really as a people? Why should we be taken away from a place that is saying it doesn't have enough to go around to then feed other people? Is it a function of who can afford the item, because we now know that the CFA is much stronger than the Naira? What exactly is the problem with this continuous taking out of grains?
Yeah, you see, the issue is really not a kind of Father Christmas approach. Let me starve Nigeria and go save Central African Republic or Niger or Cameroon. It is about some interest. What's this interest? Financial interest. What is this financial? What's the cost? Capitalism. It does not matter whether these people here are hungry. If you sell these grains in Nigeria, it's going to be cheaper. But if you ferry them out of the country, I mean, you get profit. And that's why you could see them going that way. It's good to think that they were intercepted, they were stopped, because we just have to also take care of ourselves first before going into a kind of trying to save some other countries.
With the Nigerian Tribune is the story delaying plenary in the Senate. The power situation has been very terrible lately. I'm not sure whether it got to your own side of Abuja, but I can't remember the last time that I had any kind of power supply up to an hour over the night. What does it mean really for the National Assembly that is supposed to also have a standby power generating set? Is it to give them a test of what we are experiencing at home? And I mean, what should we be doing about the power situation? Have we gotten to a point where we should all give up?
You see, it's good that they tested it so that they won't just say, no, they are just noisemakers outside trying to blackmail us as if we don't work. It's nice that they tested it. And let me go across the frontiers of Nigeria. Last week, the power authority in Ghana, the equivalence of
the one in Nigeria.
In fact, they just decided to cut the parliament completely out of electricity. Go and pay, and they had to pay half of the money, and electricity was restarted. Now, the case with Nigeria, I think that in most cases, many people see electricity as a kind of social amenity that, look, government can just dole out without paying. Look at when they say the State House is also owing, military formations are owing, embassies. I mean, big countries owing us in Nigeria. In other words, they are imbibing our own kind of culture. If up there, light does not blink, you can just come here and say, okay, let me take it free of charge. I think that people are finding it very, very hard. And you ask me what I do personally. I have this Chinese torchlight. So look, just keep it in the sun.
Well,
in the night, it serves you.
How does that help you sleep at night? I practically took my bath 5 times over the course of last night.
You see, what I also do is I have signed an agreement with sleep. Once it is 10 o'clock, 10:30, I go to sleep, it comes, sleep comes. And if I don't go, sleep must come to disturb me so that I go to bed. And when I sleep, honestly, I sleep. It's just the truth. And so, open every window, flee to the other. I mean, what do you do? I mean, we ought to have a government that is very, very sensitive, that you also wake up, allow electricity distribution companies to wake up and increase prices of this consumption as at when they feel like. And we're talking of instances where they said they generate electricity and to transmit is a problem. People do not buy. And states at the point would also generate. You now send it to national grid. How do I generate this? And I now send it. Say, okay, send it to so state. They are a commercial state. We will generate it, as you know. So it's good a thing that they've unbundled it. And I think there's a bill in the National Assembly, or the president has signed it into. I've forgotten, which now allows states, look, take charge. Just like we've seen the geometric in Bat Energy. Look, when he came in as a member of the diaspora, he accepted one. He was given this power sector thing. He saw that there was too much of government interference. He would want to move this way. He then pulled out and said, look, I will give an example of what it takes. But don't expect that this thing will come out in a year or two.
Took him 10 years.
It takes a long time to produce this, and he was going to do it, and he has done it. So this is now a kind of a template for others. Can a state government do it? Can individuals do it? Where are the industrialists? Not those who would just claim we are billionaires, but you don't see, I mean, you don't see the companies, you don't see where people have been employed.
Right. Forex billionaires. We heard Torid Lagbaja saying that the army has no desire to truncate democracy. Why do we always get these comments, popping there and there, talking about the army not being? Is there something we are not aware of? Is there something we should be worried about?
Well, around a table, when people sit down at a meeting or they are eating, you don't know who is kicking the other under the table with what leg and what intensity. Maybe there is something that we don't understand, but when you meet many of these military officers, they tell you that they enjoy more when there is democracy, because they can always talk. Yeah. They can always demand for this. They can always. But when it is military, it's just obey the last order. When you talk too much, they say ambitious officer. You just have to wait for your turn. But it's good assurance that the Chief of Army Staff, Lagbaja, is giving these assurances. Before now, the Chief of Defense Staff, Christopher Gwabin Musa, also said the same thing, that Nigerians, look, relax, we are in charge. And whoever is in uniform and wants to join the Agbada or go to National Assembly, just remove the khaki and join. That's the beauty of democracy. That's what the Constitution is all about. Yeah. But they should always allow us have a nice democracy.
Interesting way to end this conversation. I want to thank you very much for finding time, despite the economic hardship. We would not forget to emphasize that word, despite the cost of living crisis.
Yeah, you see, we are feeling that we should explain some things to Nigerians. If the media look at the Constitution, Chapter 4, they said we should hold the government accountable. Let us be that bridge between the ruled and the rulers, the governed and those governing. Let us be the bridge explaining things. But when we also explain and government feels you are too harsh, it's not about being harsh. It's just a kind of look, take a second look at so aspect so that it can lead us to somewhere.
You cannot overemphasize the role of the media in any thriving democracy. A former American president would say it is better to have a government with the media and to have one without the media. I think it was Nixon that made that statement. And on that note, I want to thank you very much for finding time to be here. And to our viewers at home, this is where we will anchor on today's show. I hope that we have met your expectation in every ramification. We will continue to do this with other programmings that will come your way in the course of today. For the time being, it's good morning from us at Daybreak on Trust Television. I am Sunday Michael Ogu.